maybe my thing is just quiet. That's probably it. Hello. Welcome. Welcome, it is me. I am back. Feels like it's been forever. But it's only been, I guess it's been 3 days, because there wasn't one 2 days ago. That's probably why it feels like it's been forever since I've streamed. But I'm back, and I'm alive, and all is well. And my heart is, full of infinite gratitude this morning, I think. That's at least what it felt like for a little bit there. And now I'm streaming, which is something to be infinitely grateful for. So no complaints. Uh, Welcome. Hello, Nikki. Hello, Face Your Fear, but you're stuck in 3 minutes of ads. I cannot save you. I cannot save people from the sort of oppressive nature of capitalism or something. I can't save anyone from anything really, but but I can do my best to do good with what I have when I can. Hello, Alec Man. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to you. It's not anywhere near afternoon for me. Also, was that all there was to your extended break? Just not streaming? No, 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 no. So, I didn't stream on Sunday, but next week or at the end of this week, uh, starting on this Friday, there will be no stream Friday, Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, and I will not be attending the Twitch book club on Thursday with Messier and Ray and Fire Raider. That's the extended break. I just didn't stream on Saturday, or whatever that day was, Saturday. I just didn't stream on Saturday because I was going to a poetry workshop, which was all right. I mean, poetry workshops are sometimes hit or miss, where that one, at least, it was very generative. It kind of just felt like 3 writing prompts, though, and wasn't necessarily like, didn't feel like it had a very cohesive through line of material or content, but it was still good to like write and be in a call with people and whatever. Poetry workshops are hard, and at very least whenever I go to one, I learn things about how to run poetry workshops, things to do or things to avoid, and you know, it was all right. I shall lurk more today. Chapter 4 is coming along, and ye will get yanked out of your socks when you read it in like 2029. Yeah, on the some distant day when I get to that point, I'm sure it will be gripping and incredible and powerful. But who knows? Maybe I'll keep reading your stuff today. I have no idea. I really don't. Uh, yeah, welcome. It's been so long. I've been kind of prolific on Substack lately, which is, maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing. I think posting on Substack is sort of a curious thing to be doing with one's time. But I have been doing it, and it's been fun. I've been enjoying thoroughly the act of sharing my art, in that way. I mean, it's not really, sharing in the way of like seeing someone respond to a poem in a very, deep and, moving way. But it is the sort of release of like, the poetry was all cloistered in my mind and in my note-taking applications, and now it's somewhere else. And I think that's a good thing, right? So it was more of a joke since you were too popular with the submissions at the moment. I feel like there are a lot of submissions, and I feel like I have nothing to read for some reason. I don't know how those two things are coexisting. But uh, yeah, not sure. Great to see you around though. Yeah, it's always lovely. What's been new? What's been new? I've been thinking about beauty, but that's not new. But I feel like I've had some. Oh, I've been thinking about gratitude a lot. That's why I said that this when I started stream that I've been filled with infinite gratitude this morning. Gratitude's a really cool thing. I think. I think the more you have of it, just the better life is. I don't think one can really be too grateful for anything, really. And gratitude's really interesting because if you are truly thankful for something and truly appreciate something, the natural way to treat that thing is with like care, right? If someone gives you a really lovely gift, you're not gonna like toss it to the side or sort of throw it away. You're gonna take this thing for which you're grateful and like treasure it and care for it and use it well and not put that thing to waste, right? That's and but like we can be grateful for lots of things. Like one can be grateful for existence, for life, for like another day on this planet. And I think that's a really cool thing to be. Because when you're grateful for a day and you truly appreciate the fact that you've been like, offered this thing, um, you're not going to waste it, right? There's no reason to sort of throw that time away on frivolous things. And that realization has been quite interesting. So I've been thinking about how one sort of practices, because I think everything must be practiced as a human if you want it to stick. How one practices, living life with a lot of gratitude, with a lot of appreciation, with a lot of that kind of feeling, and that's been really cool. I like this. I like this sort of outlook on life, or this sort of provisional truth that I've come to. It seems useful for me right now. I'd use me next to announce myself, but I gotta save up some points. Yeah, I mean, it would only be a waste to use it. But I feel like we haven't read any Cabbage in at least a few streams. Hadestown was absolutely stunning. They staged it like a traditional Greek tragedy, but with more modern aesthetic. I went and saw Hadestown live like 3 or 4 years ago. For those who don't know, Hadestown is a musical that is a telling of Orpheus and Eurydice, as well as Hades and Persephone. Uh, but it's like it has um, like swing, jazz, trombone, piano, ragtime stuff going on in a lot of the music. And hell or Hades is like a big factory and like a mine, and it's all industrial and power lines and stuff. Uh, it's a really really good musical, really really excellent. I have a playlist of songs that I like to sing. It's called Singing Songs. It's my playlist, and I have one song from that musical on my playlist. Hold on, here's the playlist. These are if anyone's like curious about my most sort of fundamental music taste, these are my singing songs. Johnny Cash Hurt. This is an incredible cover. This is some like obscure shit. Radiohead. This is kind of like the only song of theirs that I listen to. Billy Joel, Simon and Garfunkel, some more obscure shit. Joyce Manor is a great like punk band. She's from Australia. Um, and the Hey Little Songbird. This is from that musical Hadestown. Uh, Random old music. I really like this song. I like Sinatra and this like big band singing kind of aesthetic. Uh, yeah, these are the songs I like to sing. Joni Mitchell. This song's a banger. Um, yeah. So Hadestown is cool. It's the only musical that's made it into my songs that I like to sing playlist. So I do like that one quite a bit. Um, it's cool. Hello, Tiny Tim Cowboy. Welcome. Cabbage, you started writing some pentameter sonnets for different paintings made by a friend of mine. That's super cool. You're engaging in ekphrasis or ekphrasis, a Greek word, which is to create art or writing from a visual as a starting point that kind of represents that. Also saw it a few years ago. If it happened to be in DFW, then I may have been there. I don't know what DFW is, but I saw Hadestown off Broadway in Las Vegas. So, uh, though I think I won't be around for that long. Maybe the second half of stream, if at all. Okay, good to know. So don't maybe jump into your poem now if you're gonna have to leave. DFW is Dallas Fort Worth. See, it would have taken me so many guesses to get to Dallas Fort Worth. And I mean, that's not so far from me, right? I'm in the Southwest, and that's at least kind of south and west-ish Dallas. But nah. It had elements of a Greek performance, the narrator who ignores the fourth wall, the chorus, the face. Yeah, right. Isn't the narrator Hermes, right? Isn't he the one who's kind of talking to the audience? I remember the person playing Hermes was really good in the production that I saw, and I think someone's phone went off, and he like directly addressed that person in the audience during the show, and it was very funny. But he was talking to the audience and all of that. It was really nice. Something that you don't pick up from like just the recordings, right, of the music. And I had listened to the musical so much before ever seeing it, right? And so seeing it that way was really cool. And having the band on stage and stuff. That's what they did in my production that I saw. The band was all on stage. I thought that was really cool. Hermes is the original drama queen. Yeah. Definitely a queen in that musical. and Cavett is off to lurk with the Lotus Eaters. So it be. Wow, 15 stream streak. That's a lot. It's kind of crazy. Okay. So who has things submitted to me to read? I did my first stream in a long time. This past Sunday was nice. I read The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. I am not familiar with the Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. What is this book, this story, this whatever it is? That sounds really cool. It's definitely a good title, and I think I think books and stories should be judged by their covers and titles, and so it sounds good to me. I'm really not in the camp of not judging books by their covers. I really like judging things by their covers. It doesn't usually stop me from reading them. It usually just gets me to read them. The band being part of the chorus is part of the Greek theater feel. Gosh, yeah, I'm not really familiar with like the Greek theater tradition. I've read some of the Greek plays. I've read, what's the one with that king? I don't know, Agamemnon or something. I've read the one with what's his name? The guy in the fire and the Titan. Really, really bad at this, apparently, remembering these things. I think I read all of Aeschylus, and then I read a little bit of Sophocles, and those were bangers. Aeschylus was good, and then I stopped. Sophocles was good too. I wrote an Orpheus poem and posted it in Discord. Someone should write it from Eurydice's POV. That'd be kind of cool. I haven't necessarily written an Orpheus and Eurydice poem, but I have referenced them a lot. Like I wrote a poem called Catabasis, parentheses, don't look back, right? Which is a very obvious reference to Orpheus, right? Not looking back, and Catabasis, a journey to the underworld. But the poem itself has absolutely nothing to do with the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, right? Um, and yeah, I have mentioned those tragic lovers before, but never like in a full poem, you know. That. um okay. I want to read stuff. It seems like there's not very many people here. But if any of you have things submitted, then I will read them. I think that's basically what's happening. I think we read Tim's only submission before, so I always have things, but you read mine 2 streams ago. Yeah, but also there's a real upside to showing up consistently and at the start of streams, because sometimes there's just no one else here to sort of compete for that space. And if you are the only one asking me to read your work, then I read your work, right? So that's kind of cool. Uh, yeah, unless anyone else has something. But I mean, your poems are lovely, so I really have no no problem reading another one, right? Uh, yeah, I don't think we've read I Keep Myself in Silver, right? This one looks like crying and sad. What else do you have submitted? You have The Tithe of Troubles. Did we read that? Splitting Heart. Oh, we read that like randomly, just like during the 4th of July stream. I see. Then I guess I'll read the silver one. That sounds good. Yeah. Is that fine, Nikki? Do you want me to move the Orpheus one to submissions? I'm probably more interested in this I Keep Myself in Silver, unless you have a strong preference, in which case uh I can read the Orpheus one, but uh yeah, I don't know. This one seems neat. You're good with whatever? Okay. That works for me. It's good to be good with whatever. That's a virtue, I think. It's a virtue if you can like be good with whatever while like not growing complacent to life's pressures. Well, not to life's pressures, but to like oneself. Yeah, I guess we can ignore life's pressures, but we shouldn't rot. It's bad to rot. I'm just saying words. But I love saying words. And no one can stop me. I mean, I think people probably expect me to say words. That's what happens when you go live on Twitch, right? Is you're expected, pressured externally to say words, to interact, to engage. I don't know. The words are wording. Yeah, the words are wording. um, Jeez. Okay. Let's let's go to a black screen where we can watch poetry emerge from. Bam. Super not straight. Look at how like not straight that is. Is this okay? Something like that. That looks all right. Cool. Nikki, Do you have any questions or things you'd like me to focus on or think about during this particular poem as I read it and analyze it? Uh, I'd presume no, since you never really do, but there's always time to change. Here is I Keep Myself in Silver by Nikki J01. I trust in your reading. That's uh that's cool. Cold and smooth beneath my palms, my head pressed to the glass, to meet my wet and steady gaze and breathe to make it pass. I feel the quiver of my lips while watching as they shake, then trace my fingers down my cheek, the path my teardrops take. She watches me in silence, heavy shadows in her stare, as though she holds the secret to the burdens that we bear. Can I find forgiveness for the things she cannot say? Will she even listen while I gently whisper, stay? It's got a really lovely, comfortable rhythm to it. I don't have to do anything to really like. I started reading and I was just reading normally, and I'm like, oh, there's like a rhythm in this poem. There's a bounce to it, uh, and that's my favorite kind of verse or rhythm, is when it appears, sort of without trying, right? That it's sort of effortless for the reader to understand the verse, right? Cold and smooth beneath my palms, my head pressed to the glass, to meet my wet and steady gaze, and breathe to make it pass, right? It's just there. It's just, and of course, right, it's because we have, you know, well, oh, it's interesting, right? So we have your sort of A, B, C, B, right, is our rhyme scheme here. A, B, C, B, right, where we have the rhymes happening on the second and fourth lines, except not, oh, yeah, we have it at stay. And it's kind of nice, right? Because you begin to read and you get these first three that don't necessarily feel like super verse like or super metered or super rhyme schemed, right? But they have a flow to them, and then on the last line we kind of get the payoff of that thing. And I think this makes the poem really like land on those last lines, right? Where each of these last lines are kind of highlighted out of the poem, which is really nice at the end, right? When we have this gentle whisper, stay, right? And it just lands there so firmly. I'm going to read it again. Cold and smooth beneath my palms, my head pressed to the glass, to meet my wet and steady gaze and breathe to make it pass. I feel the quiver of my lips while watching as they shake, then trace my fingers down my cheek, the path my teardrops take. She watches me in silence, heavy shadows in her stare, as though she holds the secret to the burdens that we bear. Can I find forgiveness for the things she cannot say? Will she even listen while I gently whisper, stay? So, right, we're sort of looking into a mirror or a window, like the reflection in a window. Either way, right? We're looking at a reflection. I write with reflections a lot, and reflections are a motif I really enjoy, right? Because it's this way to like engage with the self and these internal ideas, but like an externalization of that that's very concrete. Uh, so right. Cold and smooth beneath my palms, my head pressed to the glass to meet my wet and steady gaze and breathe to make it pass. Right. Opening, we have this like cold and smooth. I think it's setting this tone of something kind of I like smoothness, right? Smoothness doesn't have that sort of uh, mm, I don't know. Smoothness can feel kind of distant to me, right? And when we have cold and smooth, right, we're talking about something that is sort of impenetrable, and I mean, it's glass. It's I don't know. My head pressed to the glass to meet my wet and steady gaze, right? So we're like forehead on the glass, looking straight into one's own eyes, wet and steady gaze, which I think like works really nicely with cold and smooth. These are almost like the exact same descriptors in some capacity, right? Cold and wet, right? Smooth and steady. These are, I mean, yeah, even smooth and steady, right? But it's cool because we have that consistency through here, which connects these lines in a way that's kind of similar to the connection just made by the rhyme scheme. But and breathe to make it pass, right? And if this is the line that we're sort of landing on and emphasizing through the rhyme scheme, right, then this idea is the one being like pushed out to the foreground. Breathing to make it pass, right? So there is an there is a sort of struggle or a crying or a breakdown or a whatever, and we are breathing, right? Trying to calm oneself down, trying to steady oneself, and you know not have whatever this internal suffering is kind of take over. Hi Ray, welcome. Older mirrors were backed in silver. It's where the vampire myth of not seeing the reflection originally came from. Huh. Okay. So yeah, I keep myself in silver, right? That's making reference to the mirror. Then that's not something I knew that mirrors had silver. I feel the quiver of my lips while watching as they shake, then trace my fingers down my cheek, the path my teardrops take. I mean, I think it's just a very simple, straightforward narrative, right? But I love that this motion is sort of contrasted, right? The fingers are moving down the cheek, the tears are moving, and the beginning starts with this steadiness, right? That the mirror is still, that the gaze is steady, and all of this movement is kind of happening painted onto that. And I think that's a nice way to set up, right, that we have this very, very kind of cold stillness, and then the first motion that we have is this quiver, this slight indication of suffering or breakdown or whatever, while watching as they shake, then trace my fingers down my cheek, the path my teardrops take. Just very visual, right? I mean, as I was reading it on the first read, I had my hand here, right, tracing the fingers down the cheek, and just it's very tactile. It's very nice, tactile, visual, just sensory in those two ways. And then, right, we have silence. She watches me in silence, heavy shadows in her stare, as though she holds the secret to the burdens that we bear. And I think this is kind of where the poem starts to get really like where the meat of it is in these last two stanzas, right? Because we have she watches me, and this is where we truly have this separation in the reflection, right? As there is some me that I see, right? This sort of thing that is perceptual, the self perception, right? And that is somehow different than just the me. And I like this switch, right? She watches me, because we're going from like I experience this, my head, the quiver, I'm feeling all these things, I'm doing these things, and then what's she doing, right? It brings in this second character in a lovely kind of unexpected way, and I think that's a really cool way to do that. She watches me in silence, heavy shadows in her stare. Uh, and I like this for a number of reasons, right? The idea of the shadow. One, that the shadow is, a sort of reflection, right? So it just fits the idea of her being a reflection of me, like she is my shadow. But then, like, the sort of bags under one's eyes, right? Shadows. So then it's talking about her, but it's talking about me in like a physical way of like, there are these deep bags under my eyes and I'm tired and I'm miserable and that's life and I'm staring in the mirror and it's awful. And then also like the shadow in like a very abstract sense, like the psychologist Carl Jung talks about the shadow as this sort of like part of self inside of our psyche that's like the opposite, or sort of like the embodiment of this like non-self negative emotion, things we dislike, sort of that, just that thing that haunts us. So I think shadow is really working on a number of levels here, for me in this poem. She watches me in silence, heavy shadows in her stare, as though she holds the secret to the burdens that we bear. And this next line is kind of what gave me that like inner psyche, Jungian feel, right? Because that she, this reflection of self, this shadow self, this other that is me, is somehow that thing that has the secret, right? That has the way to unlock, the problems, right? Holds the secret to the burdens that we bear. And it's also just like, I think that makes this part of self very distant, right? As though she holds the secret to the burdens that we bear. If she has a secret, then she's keeping something from me, right? She's keeping something from me. And these hidden parts of self, these inaccessible things, these subconscious processes, and I mean, so often with these like negative feelings, right? They can feel sort of enigmatic, right? To be depressed or in grief, or looking at oneself in this way of dissatisfaction, or just to be so tired and empty and done. uh, it can feel as though there's like something hiding in the self, I think, that is not, you know, close, that is somehow hidden and locked away, right? Can I find forgiveness for the things she cannot say? Will she even listen while I gently whisper, stay? So, the things she cannot say. And I think at this point we're really like digging into the idea of this like multiple multiple selves, right, within the self. Not necessarily, right, in that sort of like literal psychological diagnosis, right, where you'll have these like mood disorders or personality disorders where there are different unique selves, although it could be that, right? I think the poem could easily be read that way, as literally another self in oneself. But it seems to me like, at least for me, right? I think of this as some aspect of being, right? And there's this negative part, or like this embodiment of negative thought, of sort of dissatisfaction, and this closed off self, right? I like this things she cannot say, right? Brings us back to the prior stanza in which she holds the secret, right? So there is something inside of me that is not speaking. There's something inside of me that is not connected with the rest. And the question, right? Can I find forgiveness for that? And I think an important thing to remember in this poem is also that like, she is myself, right? She is me at the end of the day in this poem. And I think that's why the mirror is such a cool way to like break down the self, because we can look at one part as different, right? But at the end of the day, the thing we see in the mirror is still the same, right? There's an element of dissociation. Yeah, right. To see oneself as something else is definitely that idea of dissociation, right? which occurs in all of these things, right? The grief, the depression, the struggle, the exhaustion, right? One can disassociate in that manner. Um, right. So she's different, but she is still the same. So then it's like, can I find forgiveness for the things I cannot say? Right. Can I forgive myself that there are still parts of me holding secrets, parts of me that can't move forward, parts of me that are suffering? Right. And I think that's such a common thing in these states of sort of negative self-reflection. Is, the counterpart to forgiveness is blame, right? If I don't find forgiveness, and maybe I'm not, because the question is, can I? Then I am blaming this. And I think it's really easy to blame that part of self or just to blame oneself for struggle, for suffering, for all of these things, and to just stare into the mirror and look at oneself with a sort of distant, closed off, like, blame and hatred and you know resentment, maybe. I do this a lot. Well, I don't do this a lot, but I stare into the mirror a lot. Sometimes I find myself standing in front of the mirror and just like looking into my own eyes. And I feel like sometimes I get lost like that for many, many minutes because there's something just very beautiful, but also disorienting and disconcerting, I think, about like seeing oneself outside of oneself. And one can only blame and one can only forgive, right? If maybe not. I don't know. Hmm. I was going to say that one can only sort of blame and forgive if it's something outside of oneself. I don't know if we can truly blame or forgive ourselves, or like when we blame and forgive, what we're doing fundamentally is like taking a part of ourself and separating it from ourself so we can like direct blame and forgiveness. Uh, that's an interesting way to think about that. That's just like a sort of psychological question. Can one really blame oneself? Or is blame this act of like separating a thing and directing blame toward that? Or directing, separating apart and directing forgiveness toward that thing? That's an interesting question. I don't know if that's really resolvable in any meaningful way. Uh, but I think those things work differently depending on how you frame that. It's really hard to forgive or blame oneself for things that have been boxed away since those pieces are missing. Yeah, right. There's also an aspect, I think, of this poem that feels kind of like, right, you're looking for something, right? Like trying to find this thing, trying to find these secrets, trying to find those words, and they're just not there. And I think maybe that's sort of the reality of these last few lines, right? Will she even listen while I gently whisper, stay? And it's interesting. I like this line because there's so many meanings, right? To what it would mean to go, right? The alternative to stay. Should I stay or should I go? And right, to go. One could think of this, I think, in like a suicidal kind of way, right? Where there's this part of self that wants to leave and is so closed away and so shadowed and cloistered in itself and so distant that it just wants to leave and take everything with it. But then there's also this idea of, right, like a part of self that is like boxed away and inaccessible And like you said, and one is like looking for that thing, one is trying to find that thing and asking for it not to disappear, asking for these memories or these traumas or these repressed things to stay a little longer, right? So they can be found, so they can be resolved, so they don't just kind of slip into nothingness when you stop trying to look for them, right? Uh, I think it's really interesting, while I gently whisper stay, and there's just like the very material way to think about this, that is, we're looking in a mirror, and for as long as one is looking in the mirror, the reflection will stay. And as soon as one looks away, that reflection goes, right? And so it's almost, this whisper then almost becomes directed at the self that is embodied, right? The self that uh, is able to move, because it is like sort of one's choice if they leave, and that would mean, kind of all of this going away. But that's also like sort of a very human process, right? Is to look at oneself and kind of try to resolve things and try to figure things out, and then to walk away from the mirror, right? You walk away from the mirror, and then you're, living life for a while. And then we come back to the mirror and we continue to self analyze or self blame or self forgive, or to, sit with the journal and like try to understand oneself, right? That's kind of a mirror. Or to like go to therapy, um, and see oneself in this sort of removed way. And then inevitably, eventually, to go, right? And that's an interesting thing about the, at least my experience with like depression, is, I'd spend all this time, right, sort of like self-analyzing, right? And then I'd go live life and wouldn't really feel that bad. I wouldn't really feel like all was that different. Uh, and then I'd come back to like isolation and self, and then it would be like bad again. And I'd look at myself in the mirror and I'd be suffering and trying to resolve things and trying to unpack things. And then one can sort of like mask that and go live for a while. And this keeps repeating, and it's not very apparent like where and when change happens, right, during this process. And it just feels like, yeah, every time you leave the self-reflection, it's like giving up on that progress. Maybe that's a way to read this. um I almost like the idea as well of reading this poem entirely from the perspective of the version of self that's within the mirror, flipping the whole poem through the mirror in a way, right? So the I that is speaking at the beginning is the I that is in the mirror, right? And then she is the person on the outside, cold and smooth beneath my palms, my head pressed to the glass, because it still works either way, right? To meet my wet and steady gaze and breathe to make it pass. I feel the quiver of my lips while watching as they shake, and trace my fingers down the path my teardrops take. She watches me in silence, heavy shadows in her stare, right? So that she is the person outside the mirror. Um, Heavy shadows in her stare, as though she holds the secret to the burdens that we bear, right? And then it's like the embodied self, right, is this sort of distant thing, and then we become this like dissociated self, um, and there's sort of this confusion maybe that one's embodied self seems to think it has the answers, and then when looking at it from the outside, it's just like suffering and empty. um, can I find forgiveness, right? This distant perceiver self for the things she cannot say, right? Because it's sort of the embodied, awake, alive self that can see things, right? That can, function. Will she even listen while I gently whisper, stay? And then the cool thing about that last line, right, is that like the self in the mirror cannot speak to the self in the body. The self in the mirror is silent and so cannot be heard. And that's kind of a cool way to read this poem as well. Let me catch up on chat and drink some water. All right. What is up, people? Got 45 minutes to kill before the nurses I'm trying to sell to get back from lunch. What does that mean? You're trying to sell things. Trying to sell things to nurses? Trying to sell to. I don't know. Hi, Kutara, and hi, Wombat. I saw an interesting video about how therapy doesn't work well on highly analytical people because the therapy methods are like, have you thought about where these feelings come from? Is answered by, yep, it's probably X, Y, X and Y, Z is possible too. Yeah, therapy is interesting, right? Because it's just I liked therapy at certain points as a separate perspective, right? But there was a certain point, I think, where my therapist stopped offering perspectives that were vastly different from things that I'd already heard or seen or been suggested. And then it was really just like someone to speak to about like the things happening in my life. And I think, I mean, both my therapist and me both realized probably that like I could probably get the same thing out of just having people to talk to and have conversations and exist in proximity to, which is usually much more helpful because then it's like a true dialogue with a human instead of a disinvolved professional, right? I'm busy with lots of IRL stuff. Busy can be good for sure. I keep myself in silver, right, is the title of this poem. And we have silver as like the idea of the mirror, as you said, Nikki. Mirrors used to have silver, right, in them. And this is interesting, right? I keep myself. So there's this thing almost like stored, right, in the mirror, separate, that is locked off only to be returned in the action of like self-reflection, right? And I think that's cool, right? To say that like there are certain things that are just shoved down and like masked over and ignored and pushed away, and they get to be in the mirror, right? And they only get to appear upon this moment of like conscious self-reflection, and then everything just comes rushing out, right? The quivering of the lips and the fingers on the cheek and the tears and the wet gaze, right? And the heavy shadows, right? And yeah, it just feels very real, and it feels like something I personally can relate to quite strongly, right? There are certain parts of self, there are certain certain moments where things can come out, and then otherwise they have to remain underneath. Maybe that's my sort of high masking reality. But things are strictly partitioned. This is a cool poem. Silver also has antibacterial properties. Even more isolated you are when not even the germs are around you. It's a stretch, perhaps, but it's an interesting stretch, right? It's an interesting stretch. So silver is antimicrobial, right? But I think maybe a good word then is sterile, right? Sterile. I can only engage with like the most painful things in a place that is cold and smooth, right? In a place that is sterile, where there is no threat, where I am alone, where there is no other person, where there is not a germ that can interfere with this process of me like dissociating and separating self. Right? That on its own I think is a really a beautiful reading and a beautiful little angle of this poem that's quite tragic and quite real for a lot of people. So it's good to stretch. Hi, Messier. Welcome. Hello. Um, the mirror is definitely where I go when I'm having the heaviest of days. Yeah, the mirror is a place to be. Not always the healthiest place to be, but it is a place. I've definitely had some good long stares into the mirror. I've written poems in the mirror, staring at myself and like my body and like my you know human perceived, sometimes naked existence. Uh, it's a fascinating thing to like truly ponder one's own self and like the contours of one's own face and body and like the shape of one's hair and the movement of one's eyes. It's fascinating in the mirror, right? Because you can only see your eyes when you're looking into your eyes. You can't see like your eyes from another angle. You can't see your eyes when they're not focused on themselves. Uh, that kind of feels like the idea of this poem, right? The staying, the going, the as soon as you turn away, you can't see it. I did write this one while staring at myself in the mirror. It is a bit autobiographical, a bit confessional, perhaps. A lot confessional, certainly. Um, it's really nice. It's just like so. It's just a very Nicky poem, like everything's working. It has a nice rhythm to it, strong imagery, right? The sort of solid core with some variation of interpretations. um, yeah, it doesn't do anything like too different, but I imagine in like those very autobiographical, very confessional moments, the last thing you're doing is thinking like, how can I innovate on my form? So yeah, it just feels very you, right? Sometimes the mirror is the only place I can tell myself to stay. Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Telling oneself to stay, right? Because, like, the mirror, while it's like a dissociation of self, is also a realization of self, right? You know? Um, the. Yeah, like to see oneself in that way, even though it is distant, it is also like maybe the most honest way we can see ourselves. Because every other way we see ourselves has to be from like some separate observer, like a camera. But to like look into the mirror is grounding in some capacity, and like a reminder that one like has a body and a being and exists. I saw a video where some idiots put a paper up to a mirror and saw their hand on the other side when looking at an angle, and we're like, how does it know my hand is there? If the paper is in the way, it was too funny. Yeah, I mean, mirrors are trippy. um, I love mirrors. One of my favorite things. I want to fill. If I had more mirrors, they would be all around my room, and I'd be able to see myself more often. Catch myself smiling. I wanna fill a house with mirrors. I wrote a poem about that. I have a poem about my own smile, uh, and how I would build it a house of mirrors so I could see it more often. I was a long time ago. But I stumbled upon it this morning. I was looking back through some older poems from about like a year and a half ago. That was a good sentiment. It was very cute. Anyway, Nikki, do you have any questions about this, or does anyone have questions or comments about this, or questions for Nikki, or any of those things? Those are always welcome. I'm not sure. I mean, there's more to say. There's more to read, but um, I'm content with this level of surface analysis. It's funny. It feels like I didn't say very much about this. Um, but I think something that happens when you read someone a lot, um, when you read someone a lot, I think this is like truly the way to understand like style. Right. Style is almost a feeling. This is a new thought for me. Style's a feeling. Um, where it's a familiarity, right? And I can like read a Nikki poem, and since I feel like I know your poetry well, I feel like the themes and the ideas and the meaning and the sound all emerges very naturally, right? It just it's just more automatic. The same sort of thing started to happen when I was reading a ton of Bukowski, and it's even happening as I'm reading a lot of this poet Piero. Um, is the All of this just comes forward naturally when you like know a certain poet's work fairly well. Uh, it's a very cool thing. It's very sort of comforting, to just be able to read it and be like, yeah, like this feels like Nikki's work, you know. There's yeah, you don't need to unearth the author every time once you know them, or once you know the them that's in the writing. And I definitely encourage anyone who hasn't like read a single author extensively to do that. Someone compared me to Bukowski recently, and I found that very odd. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're so much more sentimental, and he doesn't use rhythm, at least not in the same way. Like the comparison maybe starts and ends at confessional, right? Like I think Bukowski is confessional, and I mean, you both use a lot of imagery, but like most poets do. Uh, I'm certainly hesitant to draw that line very strongly. It's a distant cousin. Anyway, uh, maybe a little Blake, Faber, Plath, and Rilke. Oh, you read lots of Rilke. I pulled a book of Rilke off of a shelf at a library once. I didn't really engage very strongly with his writing that time, but it could have just been the wrong time, you know. It's really nice to get to know someone's writing. It's a really cool thing. It's very special. Anyway, you said you have no other questions, so Here is I Keep Myself in Silver by Nikki. Cold and smooth beneath my palms, my head pressed to the glass to meet my wet and steady gaze, and breathe to make it pass. I feel the quiver of my lips while watching as they shake, then trace my fingers down my cheek, the path my teardrops take. She watches me in silence, heavy shadows in her stare, as though she holds the secrets to the burdens that we bear. Can I find forgiveness for the things she cannot say? Will she even listen while I gently whisper, "Stay"? I Keep Myself in Silver by Nikki. Thank you so much for submitting, and thank you for so often submitting so much and sharing so much of yourself in your work. It's yeah, I mean, I think you more than anyone I've thanked for submitting your work. But I am still thankful every time, and it's yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able to hold other people's writing. Yes, thank you. And you're welcome. Welcome in, Floral Foxes. That's a cool name. I'm imagining either foxes frolicking in flourishing flowers, or like foxes that are made of flowers. And I think both of those are very cool. Uh, yeah, foxes, or maybe foxes with like flowers in their mouths. um, it can also be this typical aesthetic judgment. I like this, so it's just like what I like. As in Spanish Golden Age, when all the anonymous poems that were found and that people considered brilliant were immediately attributed to Lope de Vega because he was a brilliant poet. This is by Lope, which later became the saying, "This is Lope's work," to say that something turned out great. That's really funny. But yeah, I think people who really like a single poet, right, like it because there are particular things they notice. And then you notice something else you like, and there's this idea that there's probably a similarity there, right? And there's a connection. I mean, I think those sort of things are generally alleviated by reading a wide range and reading a wide range of things deeply, which is very difficult to do. The more, because like, I think to compare anyone's work to another poet is a very dangerous thing to do if you don't know both of those poets intimately, because it's easy enough to pick up one work from a poet and like not have it be anything like the predominant, rest of their body of work. And that's definitely something uh to be careful about, right? And but by reading one poet very deeply, you start to understand that you're going to like run into other things and be like, yeah, this really isn't like this one thing, because it has a very specific identity and a very specific feeling that comes across when reading it. And then you go like add another one. And unfortunately, I feel like it takes many months sometimes, at least for me, but I'm slow in life. Uh, Many months to get that feeling of like knowing, really. and like feeling someone's work broadly. And like I think I can say that I can compare people to Bukowski, Mary Oliver, probably Nikki at this point, and maybe WSD Piero. And I don't think I've read any other poet to an extent where I could like reasonably compare their work to someone. And I don't think it's very useful to compare work generally. It can be, yeah. I'm not sure it's the most helpful thing to do. Don't do me, don't do me. My new poem is pretty long, confusing, and deep. I think you got to be doing some like reverse psychology, Kutara, because that really like makes me want to read your long, confusing, deep poem, right? Do me, do me. My lobster poem is pretty short and to the point. I see. We're offering two different options. Lobster. That's like, didn't David Foster Wallace write a essay called "Consider the Lobster"? I think he did. David Foster Wallace is on my mind because I had a dream about his books last night. Uh, so he wrote a book called Infinite Jest, which is considered one of the masterpieces of modern literature. This guy also killed himself. Um, it's a book of essays. I think The Lobster is one of them. Okay. So I had this dream where I was looking on my bookshelf and I was looking for my copy of Infinite Jest. Now, I don't own Infinite Jest. I don't have a copy in real life. And I kept like going through my shelves and my, stuff, and I kept finding books that were like a series of essays that are commentaries on Infinite Jest, or Infinite Jest, a conversation between X and Y, like commentary and discussions on this book. And I kept going through my shelves and I found like six of these books that were not Infinite Jest, among a number of other of his works. And I haven't read anything by David Foster Wallace, which is really interesting. Um, and I sort of just gave up, at the end of this dream. And I mean, I think there's some interesting things to think about in that narrative. The idea of conversations that people have around a work eclipsing the work itself, right? That I sort of know this work through like seeing lots of and hearing lots of people talk about Infinite Jest, but I've never read it. And so like my whole conception of this work is through other people's words, sort of like a simulacrum in a way. And and I cannot find that thing. Like the original thing has been lost through that constant string of commentary or something. I don't know. My favorite poets are Plath, Mary Oliver, and Andrea Gibson. Mary Oliver is one of my favorites as well. She's lovely. I've read a limited amount of Plath, but she's very popular among people around here, particularly Nikki. And Andrea Gibson, I've listened to a little bit of their work, and they're cool. And it's very sad that they died. uh, but I haven't consumed much Andrea Gibson. I usually don't mind comparisons because they often bring me to poets I haven't read, and that just helps expand my voice. Though my hints of Blake are because I've read Songs of Experience and Innocence. Um, until the binding crumbled. Wow, that's impressive. Uh, Funny in Spain, it's often done in tests where they give you poems and make you distinguish whether they are Quevedo or Lope de Vega. Right, so it's like teaching you to like understand. I mean, if you truly know them and their style, right, you'd be able to tell between them. So it sort of makes sense as a test taking thing, I suppose. Me when I can't tell Shakespeare from Milton. I think the title of Infinite Jest in Spanish I like the title of Infinite Jest. La Broma Infinita. What is a broma? I don't know that word. Um, is it a joke? The infinite joke then, or interesting that we get the in there. I did a poem about the body and nature. It's called "There Is Salt in My Bones, Mountains in My Lungs." Okay, broma is joke. Awesome. People, you're allowed to get mad at me. Everyone who has had things submitted for a long time. Because I'm gonna read Floral Fox's poem. Because I like new shit. That's it's just too exciting to have a new poet and something we haven't seen before, and the novelty of all of that. Um, yeah, that sounds fun. How this works, since you are brand new, Floral Foxes, is I put a poem on my screen as you saw at the end of Nikki's. I don't know how long you were here, and I read through it and I talk about it and I scribble all over it, and uh people seem to like that. um when I begin such a venture, I tend to ask the question of whether there are any things you would like me to focus on this poem, or any sort of things you would like particular feedback on. And that's a question that's entirely optional for you to answer. I will say that I'm not looking for like context or like explanation of your poem. I like to read poems as they are, right? That they stand on their own. And and if someone must explain something to me, then I don't know, they should have explained it in their poem, I guess is how I see it. So, but if it's like, oh, I feel X and Y about my style or whatever, then those kinds of things. I have no experience writing poetry in a formal capacity. Neither do I. I mean, I don't know what. I guess formal, maybe, like I've never taken a class that taught me about poetry. Um, uh, but formal, I guess form could also be form, as in sonnets and things, which you can be an informal sonnetist. So it's bad that we have multiple words called form that mean different things. I just write what I like using words and visuals. I love good globular and crunchy texture words. That, I mean, yeah, globular and crunchy are globular and crunchy, so that's good. At this point, we're here 50% for the poem, 50% for Lotus's scribble art. Yeah, it's something. um, Lotus analysis tends to take 20 minutes plus 2 minutes per stanza squared. That's quite the calculation. I also think it's not accurate. But who knows? Yeah, it tends to take like at least 45 minutes for me to get through a poem. So you're stuck here or something. Okay. It's a little wide, but we can kind of slide over as we read. Here is a poem by Floral Foxes, and you have a cute little cat as your profile picture, which is not a fox, right? One might expect a fox, but this is not a fox, and that's okay. I guess we don't have to be like consistent in our presentations of self, right? Callie is here. Hi, Callie. I only saw your message because I saw Nikki mention you, which sounds about right, right? That I would just ignore your message like that. Okay, here's the poem. Without further ado. There is salt in my bones. There is salt in my bones, mountains in my lungs, my chest transparent like a jellyfish, light and quivering with trembling tendrils that contort and twist with each unexpected breath. My skin is a shell, made entirely from thick slabs of coral, rough and hardened from years spent in this watery bed. I cry only in salt water, bury my head in my sea glass pillow as crystals emerge from my skin. This process repeats itself until I am glistening and beautiful. Fucking imagery. Nice. Mimicking my surroundings, refracting light back to the opaque surface, a flickering glow emanates from my capillaries. Steadfast and heavy, weighted down by my breath, I rest on mounds of scales and flesh which bursts like squashed fruits beneath me, stagnant and acrid, abhorrent tufts of matter, a galaxy of creatures residing within. There is salt in my bones. Yeah, okay. This is fucking cool. Obviously, I pulled out specifically as I read that. I cry only in salt water, bury my head in my sea glass pillow as crystals emerge from my skin. This process repeats itself until I am glistening and beautiful. Right? This kind of combination of like weird body stuff, right? Crystals emerging from my skin is definitely not, it doesn't sound pleasant. If we are to think of like glass, right? Glass as crystal. But we also have like salt as crystal, right? Which is then the tears and the sweat and this sort of bodily thing. This sort of, casting off of self, of excess things, right? Until I am glistening and beautiful, right? To cry everything away, to remove it all until it is something more pure, which is lovely, so lovely, right? With the sea glass pillow as this same process of, a slow erosion, right? A slow erosion of these things on the surface, taking away little bits of crystal, right? And it's sort of mirrored where we're removing these things from self through like pushing out liquid or whatever, and then the sea glass is sort of through the constant slow water of the outside, like rubbing into this thing, right? And then the tears obviously into the pillow, kind of making that into this connected action. I think that's really cool. Mimicking my surroundings, refracting light back to the opaque surface, a flickering glow emanates from my capillaries. And, so we've sort of smoothing oneself until one is, shiny and pure and perfect and glowing. There's a great magic here. And I just think that's really nice. I'm going to read the whole thing again. This is something I often do, and something that I think is very useful as a reader, Floral Foxes, is to read things many times, right? To appreciate them again and again, to to let the process repeat itself until it is glistening and beautiful, right? There is salt in my bones. There is salt in my bones, mountains in my lungs. My chest, transparent like a jellyfish, light and quivering with trembling tendrils that can contort and twist with each unexpected breath. My skin is a shell, made entirely from thick slabs of coral, rough and hardened from years spent in this watery bed. I cry only in salt water, bury my head in my sea glass pillow as crystals emerge from my skin. This process repeats itself until I am glistening and beautiful, mimicking my surroundings, refracting light back to the opaque surface. A flickering glow emanates from my capillaries. Lovely sound stuff happening here. Steadfast and heavy, weighted down by my breath. I rest on mounds of scales and flesh, which bursts like squashed fruits beneath me, stagnant and acrid, abhorrent tufts of matter, a galaxy of creatures residing within. I read this as about a guy who died on a beach or in the shallow ocean and is now being consumed. Yeah, I think that is a fascinating way to read this and a really cool one. Definitely different from how I was reading it, and that's fine. But right, we have, resting on mounds of scales and flesh which burst like squash fruits beneath me. Right, the stagnant and acrid. So this like decomposition of self. And this just makes me think generally of like the bottom of the ocean where everything comes to settle, right? And all of this waste, right, kind of falls down in the ocean and like builds up and builds up the ocean floor where you get like, just little particles and little like dead, I don't know, fish and stuff. That guy's dead. And they all go down and you get like little swirly shells and stuff, right? And they all fall down. And it just settles here and like packs up, and right, that's how you get that sort of like sedimentary and then like sandy and just sort of like really rich ocean floor kind of ecosystem going on. And I don't know all that much about ocean ecology, but right, then you get like the kind of fossilized shells and stuff and limestone and all of that. Best rock of a dead fish I've seen in years. Yeah. But yeah, to think of a person, right? There's salt in my bones. And maybe we can think of them even like being here so long at the bottom of the sea that, you have the bones, and fuck, bones, bones. You have the bones, and right, like almost osmotically, right, the salt is kind of like seeping into, yeah, like fossilization, right, where like where if it's in dirt, right, those like minerals and things seep into the bones and turn it into a rock. And I don't know how that works in oceans, but it does make me think of a sort of ocean kind of fossilization happening here, right? Uh, and then right, like almost one's body in these ways becoming replaced with the sea, and like a becoming of nature, if we are to take this literal thing, right? The chest becomes transparent like a jellyfish, light and quivering with trembling tendrils that contort and twist with each unexpected breath. Now we do have this like breathing, right? And this is sort of the thing that to me makes me think of, the person at the bottom of the sea as more, for me personally, like metaphorical, right? And while we do have, right, the watery bed could be the bed of the ocean and the sea floor, but I'm also more interested in the bed as like this thing of the person, right? With the bed and the pillow and all of those kinds of things that makes this more human and makes this more alive, right? Where it's this person and the ocean is sort of acting as metaphor, but at the same time, I also love this very visceral, right, breaking down of things into something very rich and something very alive, right? This idea of erosion or polishing, or it's almost like a distillation, right? When everything gets taken away and returned to its purest self, returned to nature, which is almost this like perfect sort of process, is very, very cool. Um, Now, something I love that I noticed, right? There is salt in my bones, mountains in my lungs, right? And this mountains in my lungs is sort of very separate from the rest of this poem in a way. I mean, it's a contradiction in of itself, right? Mountains in my lungs. Mountains are rocks and they're heavy, and we think of lungs as breathing and light and, full of life. And it connects later, right? Steadfast and heavy, weighted down by my breath. And I think this is such an interesting idea, right? Like there's something about being living or something about breathing that is fundamentally like heavy in this poem that is I don't know if it's distanced from the ocean and the sort of aquatic world which one maybe um, wishes to be a part of or something or is becoming a part of. But it's this very human thing, right? And all the things in the ocean maybe breathe through like gills and stuff. I guess there's like whales. There are whales. Unimportant. Unimportant. Whales are not mentioned in this poem. um, but it's this sort of thing that leaves one separate from this like flow of things, right? Um, oh, you said lots of things. Most of my poems slash art is all about some form of shedding self and masking emotion, which we're certainly getting here, right? I am autistic. Many of us are floral foxes. And this was written before I got diagnosed and was on the feeling. I'm gonna come back to that message. I'm gonna come back to that message to see your full explanation in a little bit, because I'm still like diving in and feeling around this poem. Uh, and I like latch on when someone sort of explains the thing, but I will read it. um, so much imagery, and I love the difference, the contrast in this poem between like right the salt in my bones and the mountains in my lungs is these hard, heavy things, right? And then we have like um, the transparency of the jellyfish and this light, quivering, trembling, right, delicate thing, right? And then we come back to the shell, the slabs of coral, right? Thick slabs of coral, again, something heavy, rough and hardened from years spent, and then boom, right? We're back to lightness, watery bed. I cry only in salt water, bury my head. Good rhyme in there. In my sea glass pillow, right? And then we're taking again this contrast of like something that is hard and something that is light, right? Something that is heavy and something that is not. And that bone on the top does not close up well. Just FYI. Looked away and came back. The close up. Yeah. Um, yeah. As crystals emerge from my skin. Okay, sea glass pillows, crystals emerge from my skin, right? And again, we're taking this contrast of like sharp and, against like something soft. And I think that's like like a whole thing within the poem, right? Is when we're thinking about the sea glass and the sea and the erosion, we're taking something very soft and gradual, right? Of like the waves coming along, doing wave things, and just very gently kind of grating away and pulling away at something that is very sharp and angular and sort of does not fit, right, in this world. And that eventually kind of the constant flow of all of this thing like degrades anything that is resistant. uh I think that's really cool. um and there's this separation, right, between land and sea, uh where I think the sea really is, it feels comfortable, right? It feels safe. It is the place where everything from the land, everything from this like other reality gets stripped away, right? And I love that the sea is then the bed, right? The bed is this safe place. Such a lovely, consistent like symbol we have in poetry, we have in literature. Um, right, the safe place that we can return to, that we can reside in, that and the bed is so much like that, right? But it's such a cool imagery to describe the bed as um, that safety, right? And we keep coming back to the bed in a way, right? This process repeats itself until I'm glistening and beautiful, right? We keep returning to sleep. We keep coming back to this place day after day, night after night, and it slowly washes away all of that. Sometimes we get like water and like the sea as something associated with dreams. There could be sort of like a meaning here, right? To fall into those waters of sleep, to have all of that washed out. This process repeats itself until I'm glistening and beautiful, mimicking my surroundings, refracting light back to the opaque surface. A flickering glow emanates from my capillaries. It's interesting to like divide this poem, I think, by the things that are opaque and the things that are clear, by the things that are hard and the things that are fluid, right? So like refracting light back to the opaque surface kind of fits in with the mountains in my lungs and the salt in my bones and the thick slabs of coral that are my skin, right? But then we have that kind of contrasted against, my chest that is like a jellyfish and my lips, right, that are kind of alive in this way. Um, Trembling tendrils. I love that. Skin is a shell, right? So that's the coral and the heavy um, thing, right? Slabs of coral, the shell. Rough and hardened from years spent in this watery bed. It's interesting because these things flow into each other, right? There's not like a clear exact line between this world of bones and mountains and these kinds of things and thick slabs of coral which are right, they're hard and they're a shell, but at the same time they have this like natural character to them. And I think it's interesting because it's an inversion of how skin is normally. I guess everything maybe gets inverted in this way throughout the poem. But, right, my skin is a shell made entirely from thick slabs of coral. So, in this place, right, in this ocean, my soft skin, maybe my skin that is vulnerable elsewhere, becomes something safe and stable, right? Where my chest before is maybe opaque and right, I cannot see inside myself. Maybe even we can think of the heart as being inside the chest, this like core of self no longer becomes something like hidden and distant, but it becomes something we can see through that is beautiful and unexpected and full of life, right? So so I think the whole thing is really this inversion, a place where one can be a self that one cannot be in other places, where one can be like, I guess, safe, right? Where one can be glowing and perfect and um, also like alone, right? But also not, right? A galaxy of creatures residing within. Steadfast and heavy. It feels like in this poem, this like sort of transformation that happens is almost to become the ocean, right? In a way, I rest on mounds of scales and flesh which burst like squashed fruits beneath me, stagnant and acrid, abhorrent tufts of matter, a galaxy of creatures residing within. Like one almost becomes disembodied. One becomes this, you know, perfect thing resting atop all of the detritus of life and all of the creatures, right? And all of that. And when one becomes like non-creature, stops being in a body, stops being in this like uncomfortable existence of man or something, man in the broad sense. Um, there is like safety, isolation, but connection, all of that, right? Um, Yeah, that's some thoughts. I think the sound in this poem is really cool, right? Uh, there is salt in my bones, mountains in my lungs, my chest transparent like a jellyfish, light and quivering with trembling tendrils, right? So we start to get this ing, which happens then throughout like a lot of the poem. We get this, mimicking my surroundings, refracting light and flickering glow, right? And I think those can really push each other into each other in a nice way. Light and quivering with trembling tendrils, right? So we're like alliterating that contort and twist, and then this becomes kind of hard T, contorted, twisted, very like punchy in a way, which I think is a great way to do twisting, right? Each unexpected breath, and then we kind of relax into that, right? My skin is a shell made entirely from thick slabs of coral, rough and hardened from years spent. My skin spent in this watery bed. So, right, we get like spent in this bed, entirely and watery. Uh, my skin is a shell made entirely from thick slabs of coral, rough and hardened from years spent in this watery bed. I cry only in salt water, bury my head. Right, so we get the head in the bed, in my sea glass pillow, as crystals emerge from my skin, and then like skin goes into glistening. This process repeats itself until I am glistening and beautiful. So we get like crystals, skin, glistening, process repeats. So there's like some S alliteration, right? And beautiful, mimicking my surroundings, refracting light back to the opaque surface of flickering glow, or this back flickering glow, opaque surface, right, emanates from my capillaries and just kind of like trails off here. Steadfast and heavy. Weighed down by my breath, I rest, right? Some assonance on mounds of scales and flesh breath rest, which bursts like squashed fruits beneath me, stagnant and acrid. Is it acrid or acrid? OMG, I come back and I legit thought Lotus drew a boner. It's just a bone. Don't worry. Just a bone. Should erase it. It's it's cowardly to erase things. It's cowardly to erase things. First one, acrid like ack. Thank you. Acrid works better either way, right? Stagnant and acrid, abhorrent, tufts of matter, right? You get that assonant sound. Uh, that's the word for that. I don't know. You said you haven't like really studied any poetry, but there's this idea called assonance, um, which is when you take similar sounds and like put them close to each other, particularly vowel sounds. It's like alliteration for vowels, basically. So stagnant and acrid, abhorrent tufts of matter, where you get that or opaque glow, right? Those things kind of like rhyming, but not at the end of words. And it's a really nice thing. It can give a lot of momentum and bounce. So a galaxy of creatures residing within. It's cool. It's cool how this just like ends. um, like your endings just feel like dots. They trail off into like imagination is sort of the feel that I get, where it's not conclusive in a way. We're left floating. I think that's cool. Um, so we're gonna keep talking about this poem, but we're gonna take a short break. We are going to take a short break, uh, because I must take breaks sometimes for my own sake. Um, so we will come back in a few minutes. Don't watch the ads on Twitch. Um, stand up, drink water, go to the bathroom, do something nice for yourself. And when we come back, we will continue to read Floral Fox's poem. I will look at the long message that you sent earlier about your writing and I guess dive into it a little bit more because there's always more to find. And I'll be back in just a few minutes. Yeah. Button. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. It's still me. Still Imogen. Still 2/3 Lotus or whatever I am. And we are still reading There Is Salt in My Bones. I'm going to read the whole thing through, and then I'm going to go back to the big messages that you were sending earlier, Floral Foxes. There is salt in my bones. It's a bone. It's a bone, guys. I promise it's a bone. There is salt in my bones, mountains in my lungs. My chest, transparent like a jellyfish, light and quivering with trembling tendrils that contort and twist with each unexpected breath. My skin is a shell made entirely from thick slabs of coral, rough and hardened from years spent in this watery bed. I cry only in salt water, bury my head in the sea glass pillow as crystals emerge from my skin. This process repeats itself until I am glistening and beautiful, mimicking my surroundings, refracting light back to the opaque surface. A flickering glow emanates from my capillaries. Steadfast and heavy, weighted down by my breath, I rest on mounds of scales and flesh which bursts like squashed fruits beneath me, stagnant and acrid, abhorrent tufts of matter, a galaxy of creatures residing within. There is salt in my bones. Okay, so you said earlier, yeah, most of my poem slash art is about some form of shedding self and masking an emotion. I'm autistic, and this was written before I got the diagnosis, and was on the feeling of other and othering, becoming something else through a shedding of self in order to assimilate to what to you feels other, but also a lot of reflection on the female body and nature. So in some ways, removing my humanity and becoming nature was an idea that is comforting because you step outside the reality of social norms and expectation. Yeah, it's interesting because this poem can be read kind of both ways, where the self is slipping away into like the ocean of reality, right? The ocean of other creatures and social norms and like societal stuff, right? But also it can be read in like isolation, right? In the bed, in a safe place, distant from all of that. And then the comfort, right, is this sort of self emptying where there is no thing anymore. There is no person here, um, which is subject to society, right? When you become non human, you sort of stop obeying these societal rules. You just become other. In another way, that becomes this human nature hybrid chimera. Yeah, a chimera. When I get too stuck on the idea of self, or what I should be, or who I am, etc., especially after years of masking, imagining my body being a landscape of huge proportion that sustains life for the billions of little microorganisms, kind of similarly removes the worry of self. Yeah, yeah, these are really lovely ideas, um, and ones that I personally resonate with a lot. Right, um, the the idea of self is something more than anything that I have thought about on and on and on and on, right? And and it's a really cool depiction of self, right? Very Osamu Dazai, you say, Ray. Maybe I've only read the one of his books, No Longer Human, but it does have that idea of like a distance from humanity. So yeah, right. This is a really cool thing we can do as poets, as writers, is by the use of metaphor, right? By the use of metaphor, I am blank, I am blank, right? I am a jellyfish, I am the ocean, I am coral, right? Whatever. Uh, we create distance between the original thing and the new thing, right? Or between itself, maybe, right? By talking about the body as a million other things in this way, like a repeated metaphor over and over and over again, right? We get this aspect of stripping away. And I think that's a really lovely use of repetition, right? Sometimes repetition we use in a way that slowly like builds something up, right? Where we say something and we say something again, and every time, it gets like more intense and it gets stronger and it goes up, right? But in this way, right, we start with kind of like a complete body, right? Or we start with each of these parts of body, and each one gets stripped away and each one gets moved closer to being ocean, right, until that thing is entirely gone. uh, and I think that's a lovely way to use repetition, or a lovely way that repetition can be used in a work. Yeah, and it's like beautiful body horror. I see this a lot lately, I think, in poetry and in modern poetry is like depictions of self in these spaces of like neurodivergence, or like a lot with like queer people, is using body horror as a way to like explore the body, um, and a way to explore like a dissatisfaction with self. Yeah. Title, right? The title is "There's Salt in My Bones." Important to talk about the title. Of course, it's just the first line, but I think it's a it feels like a very intentional use of that, right? Salt in my bones, right? When we talk about something kind of seeping into my bones, right? It really it means that it's on that core level, right? It's that most fundamental thing, right? If the cold has gone into your bones, then it's like you are cold beyond belief, whatever, right? So to say there is salt in my bones, uh, is almost to say like this ocean, this idea, this outside, this other has crept into me so deeply that it's like become part of me, and I think that's really cool. I love how you can also use this as a way to think about like heritage, right? It's like in my bones, or it's in my soul, or it's in my blood, are these things people will say that they are like inherent and fundamentally connected to self, or to like one's being. And so it's like this idea of salt, this idea of ocean, this whole idea of the gradual stripping away, right, is a fundamental process in my life, which is sort of what you're explaining. And I think that makes the title work in another layer that's very functional for you. I think it's also something they did in the past, especially women that became trees or plants as a way to escape patriarchy. Right. Yeah, plants, right, when the world feels unnatural and the world feels arbitrary, it's very automatic, right, to turn from something like that, the world that looks like this, um, to a world that is, I mean, natural, right? Something that is just simple and beautiful, right? And doesn't have those sort of complications of the human mind. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, Floral Foxes, do you have, after all of this that I've said, this little look, do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts on anything I've said, or anything separately? I mean, it can be, anything about writing, really. Doesn't have to be about the poem in particular, or any comments or whatever. And also, if anyone else has comments or questions, now is a decent time. Yes, nature's violence and horror isn't personal or intentional. It's just nature, right? It's just that flow, and there's a real beauty to that, to something that doesn't care, something that doesn't have all these structures, right? Nature doesn't have a self, unless of course we give it a self, right? Um, but which many people will do, right? Mother Nature and all, or to say natural disasters are God, because it's difficult, right? It's interesting because it's so difficult and also so comforting to see nature as arbitrary, or to see the world as arbitrary. Because in one sense, it's like, man, everything can just be destroyed, right? And some people would much rather say that the hurricane is God, right? Because there's a comfort in knowing that this thing wasn't just, it just happened because. But then it can be very comforting because, you know, all of this stuff around me, it just, exists and these processes just go on and they are like sort of unjustified, and I can exist in this place and not be judged by it, right? That's very cool. Um, just thank you. It was really cool to hear your thoughts, and I'm going to try and deconstruct my poems like this. The process of pulling it apart was really nice and helpful. I'm glad it was helpful. I will say, Floral Foxes, from my experience, um, it's always harder to, in my experience, now it might be different for you, but it's much harder for me to deconstruct my own poems this way than it is for me to deconstruct other poems this way, right? Because some of the fun of doing this is in like the discovery and the finding things and the little wonder of like, ooh, stagnant and acrid, abhorrent tufts of matter. Oh, that's a cool fucking line, right? And 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 also analyzing one's own work. I think there's slightly less to be learned by reading other people's things. We expose ourselves to like new ways of writing and new ideas. Now, I absolutely encourage you to try to analyze your own poetry. It can be really nice to like reflect on your own things and think about them. I haven't found much success with it, but if you do, then that's fucking awesome, and then I'll ask you to teach me how to do it. But it's very hard for me. I am trying to get back into writing poems, and honestly, I gotta be honest. When I write, it just comes out with a little amount of editing. I am very similar. I am I am very similar. I just dump things onto the page. I don't edit often. I will revisit poems after a long time. I'll go back into my old work because then I feel kind of like distant from it in a way. Um, but yeah, like editing's hard. Writing is fun. uh, I added another for whenever else more poems are needed. That's so exciting. That is so very generous of you to share another for the future. um, you write beautiful word vomit. I would never flush it down a toilet. Yeah, we would just leave it there to sort of fester and grow very, just become like a biohazard, right? I think of most art as just like vomiting and spitting stuff out onto the page, and then other people like kind of find beauty in it. It's like Haruspexes, the oracles who would cut into the guts of animals to see the future. Very gross thing to do, but there's some value there, I guess. Maybe it's not a great metaphor or analogy. Um, Still a heavy metaphor, but less so than this one. More, also less rooted in reality. That sounds cool. um, as in, it references the real world, but also takes it wildly further away from possible physics. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Um, so, that being said, since there are no other questions or thoughts or that kind of thing, I think we'll give this poem a final read. Enjoy it in that last moment, and then move on to something else. If you've ever seen Howl's Moving Castle, how I write slash imagine my poetry is when he melts into the chair and becomes all gloopy. Have I seen Howl's Moving Castle? I haven't. I've seen Spirited Away. But that idea, right, of this very like magical, sort of physics defying beauty, um, that makes sense, right? Sort of a magical realism. Anyway, there is salt in my bones. There is salt in my bones. Mountains in my lungs. My chest, transparent like a jellyfish, light and quivering with trembling tendrils that contort and twist with each unexpected breath. My skin is a shell, made entirely from thick slabs of coral, rough and hardened from years spent in this watery bed. I cry only in salt water, bury my head in my sea glass pillow as crystals emerge from my skin. This process repeats itself until I am glistening and beautiful, mimicking my surroundings, refracting light back to the opaque surface. A flickering glow emanates from my capillaries, steadfast and heavy, weighted down by my breath. I rest on mounds of scales and flesh which bursts like squash fruits beneath me, stagnant and acrid, abhorrent tufts of matter, a galaxy of creatures residing within. There is Salt in My Bones by Floral Foxes. Thank you so much for sharing your work. It is incredible, and it is an honor and something I am so thankful for, that people just show up and want to share their writing with me and entrust it in me to discuss and, pick apart and talk about. Really, thank you. It is lovely, and that was a very beautiful work, very beautiful piece of writing. Okay, so I remember in college we were asked to do a self-portrait. Everyone else did something resembling themselves. I made a miniature house with rotten wallpaper and wooden floors, then a small leather armchair, and made an animation of a kind of clay ball of goop that was sort of like skin and just spilling over the edge of the chair. How I didn't know I was autistic, I will never know. Yeah, that's not a bad sign, right? um that sounds quite cool. That sounds quite beautiful. Armando Uribe said, "In matters of poetry, there are no conclusions, just as there are no beginnings or endings. There are only outpourings of poor people. Poor, poor people." Yeah, that's a way to put it. I was very into Tim Burton at that time. I don't know who Tim Burton is, but I can paste it into my browser and I can see. Tim Burton, American filmmaker and animator, known for pioneering goth subculture in Hollywood, distinctive style that blends gothic horror, dark fantasy aesthetics with whimsical and surreal elements. And we are... Oh, wrong button. We're on Wikipedia now. We made it. Very common occurrence. Filmography: Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, Batman. There's a lot of movies. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Interesting. Okay, so that, yeah, definitely the surreal, I see. And Alice in Wonderland. Gotcha. Another Beetlejuice. Planet of the Apes. Interesting. Okay. So, many movies. Seems a good inspiration to have. I need to watch more movies. I need to be more hip to all these things. But I also need to, read more poetry and all of that. Sometimes I forget how young you are. Yeah, my 22-year-old self being like, who's Tim Burton? Who are these people? But yeah, I mean let me look at the list again. Half of his movies came out before I was born. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Yeah, yeah. I am the inflection point of Tim Burton's career between Big Fish 2003 and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory 2005. Um, and I wasn't conscious really until 2010 for Alice in Wonderland, uh, which means really I was only like aware and a human for the last six. Tim Burton's best movie is The Big Fish. Okay. Okay, good to know. uh, so many movie recommendations. It's really, and Edward Scissorhands. I've heard of Edward Scissorhands. I have not seen it. Okay. Oh, and classics are ace. Very a film authority in here. Your favorite is Edward Okay, so these are definitely the consistent like top two among all of you. I'm a Nightmare Before Christmas girly, but I'm a Halloween baby. I see. I don't like Halloween personally as a event. Not my thing. That was my hated dressing up. Hated the idea of it. That was some of the autistic gender stuff and like repressed. I don't know, buried notions of self. Always scared me. Always scared me a lot. I wasn't scared of the scary things on Halloween. I was scared of the idea of like being seen, being seen as presenting something like not myself. I don't know. I was a weird kid, right? I've been thinking of sometimes just jump on the Discord and announce I'm gonna make a movie watch along. You should do that, Ray. That'd be badass. Well, the gods decided I would have to like Halloween by kicking me out of my womb early. Yeah, I mean, sometimes fate just decides things for us, right? I think I'll read another. I think I've got that. I've got a lot of life energy in me. I've got a lot of vril. So I don't know. Okay, me. It's been a while since we've read anything from you, Kutara, so I do like that idea. Um, so, like, it's been a long time, I think. What am I supposed to read of yours? Because you've submitted some things more recently, right? And then you've submitted some things probably less recently, but you have And Breath, which you submitted like 2 days ago. But you probably also have other things floating around. Maybe, I don't know. Hard to know. Hard to see anything. And Breath, I can read that. That's cool. You sent it as a text file. That's interesting. How do I get open in Pages? Continue. There are too many file formats, I think. I think we can like get rid of a few of them and the world wouldn't be much worse. You know? Maybe some like computer people will call that blasphemous or whatever, but like why do we need like text files and doc files and PDFs? I love PDFs. I love PDF. That's like a website. Maybe I'm a bit of a nerd for having a favorite file format though, so I guess if we got rid of all of them except for PDFs, then like it wouldn't really stand out as a favorite. Okay, we're gonna read And Breath. That is what's happening. Katara, as we dive and delve, can't say delve anymore. People might think I'm a chatbot. As we dive and delve into this poem, do you have any questions? Any things you would like for me to focus on, think about, keep in mind as I read it? Or am I just to go in with myself and my weak apparatus of cognition and a dream of understanding and finding beauty? You gave us a white background. This is uncommon, but not disallowed. Yeah, any questions before we and breath it up? That sounds like the kind of title that like I would title a poem personally. Um, and breath. That definitely sounds like an Imogenism in terms of poetry. I write a lot about breath in general, I think, and I talk about breath a lot. And then this like and at the beginning, this conjunction. I do things like that, or maybe I had a phase. I'm not sure. Maybe I haven't done that in a while. Try to understand the metaphors. I often do. So that's good for you, right? That I tend to want to understand metaphors, but there is no reason that we can't give special attention to the metaphors and their meanings. Here's End Breath. Tears of the minorities approach with fury, unaware of water and air in the illusion of continuity. They slip into the herd stealthily. The one who finds to be the one who finds. The spoon can no longer gather. The sun burns not the lows, but the peak. The one who finds to be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. Who will surface? Hatred or lust? Someone must. Is this not why we assume the buckets are full of water? Who will be a snow-white crow on that approaching first step? Someone must. Is this not why we assume winter is cold, and cold is winter? Eagerness takes more to its path. The harmful ones approach with fury, unaware of heart and mind in the deception of nature. They slip into the herd mistakenly. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. Those who remain indifferent recklessly meet the desires of sensations. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. Terror, scream, breath. Fate and intelligence clash. Mind and desires fight. The sole cog of indecision and folly keeps turning at full speed. The movements of views repeat once more. To be the one who finds, to be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. Domination takes shape. Into the very center of screams and giggles, a bomb is dropped, subtly and accepted to be the one who finds, to be the one who finds. The tear of the minorities wins with fury, unaware of water and air in the illusion of continuity, warm or claimed to be warm. From that comfortable roof it steps outside. Upside down, mistakenly, it breathes. Dangerous or unstable, but the only place to look or see. Cold, claimed to be cold, but the only place to know, or in the curse of knowing, to be a branch. The tear of the minorities wins with fury. Upside down, mistakenly it breathes. Terror, scream, and breath. Interesting how much the words want to be tear, scream, and breathe, right, with the rhyme. But it is breath, right? It is lacking of an E at the end. That's a curious thing. And upon a first read, I find myself absolutely uncertain as to the meaning and to the metaphors. And this is okay, you know? Some poems are cryptic and want and demand one to kind of dig in and kind of fight the battle of understanding. Uh, and I think this is one of them, right? And this is lovely because yeah, even me who reads poems all the time, right? Over and over and again, so many poems. Sometimes you just read something and it's like, okay, we gotta really like dig into this one and parse it and figure it out if we want to know what it means. At least for me. Callie, no, you're not the mascot of my stream. Um, and you won't be. Um, no apologies there. So, let's go line by line, maybe. I think that's a good way to read things sometimes. And breath. Tears of the minorities approach with fury. So we have this idea in the poem of the minorities, which is so like lovely and vague, right? Even just the idea of a minority is vague because it's just sort of like any who isn't the majority. And right, you can be a minority in the sense of like an identity among a society, which this could be referring to, right? Minorities as, you know, X race in X country, X or Y sexuality, or, gender identity in whatever place or culture. But one can also just, like, other things can just be minorities, right? This idea extends beyond identity and all of that, right? Uh, Tears of the minorities approach with fury, unaware of water and air. In the illusion of continuity, they slip into the herd stealthily. So, I mean, this at least connects with the idea of like being a minority, right? To slip into the herd, to be one who is somehow different, right? They within the herd, such a common use for like the masses, right? So to be one who is different. Now for the tears to approach with fury, um, is interesting, right? Uh, just to use a word like fury, something that strong, but unaware of water and air in the illusion of continuity, they slip. So they, right, the minorities, as this is to be read, somewhat grammatically, are unaware of water and air, whatever that might mean for us. And they are in the illusion of continuity. In the illusion of continuity, they slip into the, well, maybe not, right? There is an illusion of continuity, and that could be the thing allowing them to slip into the herd, right? As though, like, the majority sees as the majority wants to see, and so the minority does not get seen by the rest, sort of through that expectation of the same, the illusion of continuity, that nothing will change. Whenever we start to talk about minorities and the herd, one begins to wonder, I think, naturally, if there is some sort of political slant to this poem. There's nothing necessarily that I think, overrules that idea yet. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. Right? So I think this is speaking in some way to, within this herd, right? Within this group of many, there is some thought of maybe value, right? To be this thing. I think if we say like to be blank, I think usually there's like a positive connotation there. But to be the one who finds what, right? Probably the minority, whatever that may be, picking that out from the herd. this all still exists sort of in a vacuum, right? This poem, there's very little in this poem, I think, that strongly points to any like specific reality. Um, it's all existing very much in like abstraction, um, and like a concrete detail, right? Some concrete details can help pull us to like a strong, a confident interpretation of a metaphor. Not that there can be like one that is true or like perfectly correct, right? Um, and like I think herd and minorities, right? These kinds of things are like the most concrete in making me think that we'd be referring um, to something political. There's also an idea of like a wolf in sheep's clothing when we start to do herd, where there's like this one hidden minority stealthily among this group, right? And that having fury kind of makes sense. um, and perhaps those sheep would like to unveil that wolf hiding among them. Unsure. The spoon can no longer gather. The sun burns not the lows but the peak. So, right, these are sort of like inversions of things. Mountains are cold and lowlands are often hot. So we have this switching, and the spoon can no longer gather. So, like, there is this abstract symbolic inability to do the thing that it does, or like an inversion here. Um, we can think of like the spoon, like having holes poked in it, right? And water now kind of seeps through it or whatever. But I think like the inability to gather is probably somewhat connected, at least in my mind, to the idea of a herd, right? And if we're talking about, peaks and lands and landscapes, right? The place in which these things exist. Uh, the one who finds to be the one who finds tear, scream, breath. Tear. It could be tear, scream, breath, right? Tear. So then these are like objects, right? This is a tear, as in a teardrop. This is a scream, as in, a sound. And this is a breath, as in, a breath. So then these become nouns, right? Rather than they become verb, noun, right? It becomes tear, scream, breath. That seems more reasonable, right? Because we sort of set up the tiers of the minorities, and tear, scream, breath seems like it wants to be verb, verb, verb. But there's a comfortable ambiguity here where I think it could be read either way. Tear, scream, breath, right? So we have this like sadness, we have this pain, we have scream as something either like fearful or perhaps something with fury, right? And then we have the breath as some sort of release, which kind of feels similar to this like tear and fury, um, right? The scream is fury, and then breath is some sort of like relaxation from that thing, I suppose. Uh, Still very, very open. Who will surface? Hatred or lust? Someone must. So this naturally feels kind of connected with fury, right? To have hatred, to have fury. Who will surface, right? Who will be found? What minority will be found among this herd? Hatred or lust? Someone must. Is this not why we assume the buckets are full of water? Which feels like symbolically nicely connected to the spoon, right? The spoon is something that gathers, that can hold, and if the bucket is kind of similar in a way. Um, and this feels similar to like the illusion of continuity, right? The expectation that like all is kind of normal, right? That like nothing changes. Maybe with the idea of the herd, there's a feeling of like the status quo kind of emerging in this poem, that like what is will remain, the buckets are full, and all of that. And there's like maybe some desire inherent to that, to like root out that which is unexpected, right? To root out the minority, which then broadly speaks to a lot of rather sinister things, right? The idea of rooting out that which is not in the status quo, right? Um, you know, political reading is fairly evident at that point, maybe, if we are to take it that way. Um, and then like the one who finds to be the one who finds, right? And you find one of these, you know, minority, right? And so there is a tear, and so there is a scream, and there is a breath, maybe even a last one, as unpleasant as that might be. Who will be a snow white crow on that approaching first step? Someone must. Is this not why we assume winter is cold and cold is winter? I like this line. Is this not why we assume winter is cold and cold is winter? There's like a self justifying here, right? Like this is normal because normal is this. This is expected because expected is this, right? This is the society or like the politics that we live in. And so, like, that is, yeah, the normal. Um, who will be a snow white crow on that approaching first step, which has the same feel of like this inverted idea, right? Of the spoon that doesn't gather, right? The thing that breaks the status quo or the expected, this tension of whatever exists normally. And to take the first step is right to be this one to kind of like break the notion of what is. And this, I think, very abstractly can be applied to like any situation. So this could be maybe the first person to, I don't know, rebel against this like abstract sort of societal herd and like truly do something, right? Truly like make a difference is maybe like a reading there. We could think of two people who like are like at an impasse and refuse to speak to each other and like do not have a conversation, and who will be the first to break this like social status quo, right? I think this can be applied to like many situations. There's a reverse reading if we were to get like really specific political, of like a snow white crow along with a poem talking about minorities. This snow white could be like a white hood. um it doesn't strike me as that being the reading. um but like, you know, to discuss it in that way, which I don't think this poem glorifies that either way, if we are to read this as like a very direct poem about hate, right? I think this poem is pretty anti hate, it seems. Although that reading would feel disconnected from what's been set up as these like inverted things being part of the minority as opposed to the status quo. So I think more of the Snow White Crow as that is speaking out, trying to change something, right? Crow is interesting. Crows are like omens, right? Crows are like omens of death. Uh, but they're also like collectors of things, and they're very smart, right? So we might think of the crow as like an intelligent animal that stands out from the herd, right? So like the snow white crow as like the thing that is smart, standing out from like the herd of mindless sheep, I guess, which feels maybe consistent. That feels consistent with the poem, right? Snow White, herd, sheep, all of that. Um, if a reductive view of society, but certainly the way that some people think about it. I mean, I think there are people who think like I am the one person who sees that society is bad and everyone is just a sheep that's complicit. I think that's not exactly how that works, but that's like a potential reading of this work, right? Someone must, right? Someone must do the thing. Someone must break the expected. Um, is this not why we assume winter is cold and cold is winter? I really like this line. I think you do a good job, Katara, with like individual kind of self-contained philosophic bangers, and that's one of them. Eagerness takes more to its path. The harmful ones approach with fury. Eagerness takes more to its path. So then maybe this speaks to like something growing, right? More to its path, more people on the path, this path of something different, more harmful ones, more furious ones. Unaware of heart and mind in the deception of nature, they slip into the herd mistakenly. And this is interesting, right? Because then like these people are different. These minority to its path. Unless this says like unawareness. Unaware of heart and mind in the deception of nature, but they is harmful ones with fury, which I think is to be associated with fury, right? Slipping into the herd. All of this says that they are like the other minorities, but different. But then there's this idea of like someone aware slipping into the herd mistakenly, and that would speak as something different than the crow, something unintelligent and just like assimilating like kind of automatically. Um, to be the one who finds, to be the one who finds. Those who remain indifferent recklessly meet the desires of sensations. So then this seems pretty like right along with that theme, right? Those who remain indifferent, who are just in the herd without seeing, recklessly meet the desires of sensations, and maybe this is just like a fulfillment of life um, through like consumption, right? If we're talking about like a now like a modern political reading where like you just get your desires filled and you just like get to buy things and sort of remain indifferent to like the suffering of the world in your own little like bubble of experience, ignoring like the suffering in the world. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. And maybe that's just what happens, like when one unsees the herd and one can like understand society in a broader context. It's a great suffering. It's a great suffering to lose this sort of like innocent and virgin mind. Right, if we think of the sheep as something like white and clean and untouched, and uh, uh, so to find out, to realize, to like exit the herd is sort of like a great suffering and a great isolation, perhaps, if we are to assume the herd. uh and and then one like is left with this life where one must question like whether to like reassimilate and sort of like play along or whatever. There's a similarity in that to like the last poem we read in a way. Fate and intelligence clash. Yeah, so this idea of intelligence is becoming a pretty strong through line with the herd, um, with the unaware, with the crow, right? So I think it's about like intelligence and one's own like relation to society. Fate, right? Fate is just to exist sort of automatically, maybe, or even there's like a faith idea here, um, to just like assume things will be. Um, hey, Leo, and welcome in. Uh, my mind. So fate and intelligence clash. My mind desires flight, which connects the mind and the intelligence to the crow, right? So that feels pretty strongly justified as the crow as the intelligent one within the herd. The soul cog, right? The gears in the head. of indecision and folly keeps turning at full speed. So this could also be like the cogs of society. Indecision and folly, right? Non-action, to do nothing, to just be foolish, just continues, and society just unfolds in its arbitrary, stupid ways. Um, the movements of views repeat once more. To be the one who finds, to be the one who finds, tear, scream, breath. The movements of views repeat once more. What is that referencing? The movements of views. Did we have movements of views? Repeat once more. Movements of views could be like a movement, as in like an ideological one, and then it's a movement of views. Movements of views could be like landscape changing. Yeah, societal views. Yeah. Yeah. Floral foxes. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good thinking. Good analysis. The movements of views repeat once more. Right. Which is interesting. So then this is just like I guess like the natural and gradual shift of like a societal status quo, which is not particularly like it's just repetitive. It's just the same, right? We can think if we're like talking American, perhaps, then it's just like the back and forth of like an ideological left, right. Um, would make sense with the idea of the herd. Yeah, I think so. And maybe then the herd is just something subject to like the societal, political, like Overton window status quo. Just like, here's a vocabulary word, the Overton window. There's some dumb political theory stuff, but like the Overton window is essentially like the space which is like acceptable ideological ideas to express in society, and like everyone who's considered like status quo exists within the Overton window. So in America, it's very normal to just say like pretty like right wing, like fascist things. But like the Overton window doesn't go very far left, and you can't say much more than like I want healthcare without being called like a commie, right? And you can go pretty far this way before like you're really too problematic to be like a like a Nazi, because like that's just okay for, it seems, to just like, I don't know, be authoritarian in America. And like you can be very capitalist, and you definitely can't be like an anarchist. You can't cut down flock cameras, although you should. Um, so yeah, so then the movements of the views, right? Wherever the Overton window exists, the movements of the views, um, just kind of has, and I mean, if we're talking American politics, right, we have this sort of like left, which is like some president here, like Obama, who's a centrist, and then like right, and then left, and then right, and then this sort of defines sort of the space in which discourse can happen and in which the herd can roam, and maybe that idea of movement as well, right? That the herd can only kind of move within this accepted political space. Uh, what the fuck is this commie shit, right? uh, I feel there are bars to that Overton window in America. There are bars on the Overton window. Oh, that itself is a bar. Um, yeah, our Overton window is boarded up. Uh, it's also interesting that Nazi used to be the common description for like most evil. Yet America and England have been doing way worse for years, and through history, and even the Nazi ideology and tactics, were like, yeah, Yeah, there was like the thing with like the Nazis who like studied American like fascist movements to like understand how to be better. Um, but I mean, yeah, right. America built on massive genocide, mostly historically ignored. Um, it's hard to draw like the, let's say America doing way worse conflation because like the Holocaust was pretty bad. And I think at a certain point you get to like an asymptotic pure evil where like everyone pretty much balances out. um, but yeah, America sucks. Don't get me started on what they did to the Irish. Oh, the British, as an Irish person, yeah, right, erasure of language and culture and all the wars and stuff, which I don't know a ton about. And the British, of course, is just like global empire, right? I mean, you have like the starving of like the engineered famines in India, right? Um, so all of these things are pretty bad. Um, they did to the Irish too. Gotcha. Yeah. So this poem, like by this point, I think feels pretty distinctly political. And we have domination coming up. So yeah. Oh, and then a bomb is dropped. Yeah. Okay. This feels political. Um. Anyway, we're gonna take a brief break. It's good to come up for air from like digging into a poem and maybe realizing it's talking about some shitty political stuff and have like gotta give the mind a rest sometime from all of that, or else it can become overwhelming. So 3 minutes. We'll be back in. During that time, don't watch the ads. I'd encourage you, if you are able, to stand up, move your body. Walk a little bit, look away from the screen, not just switch to another tab. Even if you're lurking, and can hear me, like take a break from whatever you're doing. Get off your ass. Drink some water, stretch, do something good. You deserve that. You really do. Um, you. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Yo, welcome back. I hope we stood up and did something good during that break. Uh, Floral Foxes, you were saying some things in chat. Reminder that whimsy and joy and self care is a radical movement to fight against capitalism and fascism, so tending to ourselves and allowing for rest and healing is punk. Yes, no resistance occurs without care for oneself, and these things, these care for the self allows care for others and gratitude, which is the backbone of true community, right? And it is true community and generosity and these kinds of things that are so antithetical to capitalist ideals, right? um, Sounds like you know your punk ethics. um, um, Even smaller European countries have done mass genocide. Belgium and Africa. Yep, under Leopold, Netherlands, and the Boers in South Africa. Yeah. Um, Human history is very, very dark. Yep. Yep. Belgium is a weird case because Congo was private property of the king, and the government was just like, WTF, dude. So the king just did that. He was just like a shitty dude, and the government's like, why are you doing genocide? And he was like, because I want to. Um, yeah, that sounds real pleasant. Um, yeah, it's important to take care of ourselves and be educated about things, but also try not to become overwhelmed by the sort of misery present in the past. Present in the past. Isn't that that's a it's a bar. 10%. That's a good typo. That's a funny typo. I should start saying that. I should start saying that to people. They should say something that I really don't agree with and be like, yeah, I agree with that. Like 10%, dude. That would be really. That's a good bit. That is a good bit. um, what was I saying? I was saying that present in the past um, is kind of a bar, right? Something being present in the past, because present, past, right? But it's really just saying that it was there, that it existed. Anyway, um, yeah. Let's keep reading. Let's keep reading. The past is ever present. There you go. Domination takes shape. I feel like normally I come back from the break and reread the whole thing, but I'm just going to keep going. Yeah, I'm going to read the whole thing again. It's good to read the whole thing. And breath. Tears of the minorities approach with fury, unaware of water and air in the illusion of continuity. Okay. It's good to go back. See, I try to read the whole thing as itself, but then I start making comments. Water and air, right? These things are ubiquitous. They are like the thing that surrounds us that we don't notice at all. Um, that's a good symbol. Anyway, tears of the minorities approach with fury. Unaware of water and air and the illusion of continuity, they slip into the herd stealthily. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. The spoon can no longer gather. The sun burns not the lows, but the peak. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. Who will surface? Hatred or lust? Someone must. Is this not why we assume the buckets are full of water? Who will be a snow-white crow on that approaching first step? Someone must. Is this not why we assume winter is cold and cold is winter? Eagerness takes more to its path, the harmful ones approach with fury, unaware of heart and mind in the deception of nature. They slip into the herd mistakenly. To be the one who finds. To be the one who finds. I keep wanting to put the to be right there. Those who remain indifferent recklessly meet the desires of sensations. The one who finds. To be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. Fate and intelligence clash, mind and desires fight. The sole cog of indecision and folly keeps turning at full speed. The movements of views repeat once more. The one who finds to be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. Domination takes shape. Into the very center of screams and giggles, a bomb is dropped. Subtly, but accepted. Okay, yeah, that hits. The one who finds to be the one who finds. The tear of the minorities wins with fury, unaware of water and air. In the illusion of continuity, warm or claimed to be warm from that comfortable roof, it steps outside. Upside down, mistakenly it breathes, dangerous or unstable, but the only place to look or see, cold or claim to be cold, but the only place to know or or in the curse of knowing to be a branch, the tear of the minorities wins with fury, upside down, mistakenly it breathes. Tear. Scream. Okay. I think I understand this poem. We're going to keep going line by line because it's still a lot to break down, and it's still very kind of obfuscated, which I think is a clever thing, given what the poem might be saying, at least to me. Meanwhile, Chile freed slaves even before achieving independence, and freed them in every war in which it participated. That's fucking goated. Now I need someone to like go find if Chile's done any evil shit too. Maybe they just haven't. There are probably some countries that just haven't really done evil shit, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's not very anarchist of me, and statehood is evil. To be a state is to inflict great horror or something. Anyway, domination takes shape. Into the very center of screams and giggles, a bomb is dropped. This reminds me of recent current events. Like Iran, with like the bomb that got dropped on the school, or bombs that got dropped on the school. Right, domination takes shape. A bomb is dropped into the very center of screams and giggles, right into these screams that are positive, these screams that are joyous of children, right? Children getting killed, right? And then subtly and accepted, right? And I think we've set up the idea through this like discussion of the status quo and through people not seeing, people not paying attention to what is happening in the world, that a bomb can be dropped subtly. And this is a very terrifying like reality that I think this poem describes, is that horror can unfold kind of under the veil of like politics and media. And I think there's probably a number of people, I'll say in America, right, in the country in which I live, who are unaware of like the sort of horrors that the country is causing abroad. I am probably unaware. Even like the wokest of the woke is probably unaware of like great horrific things that have occurred in like Iran or in Palestine, because of, you know, like an information state, right? This like you know, grasp on narrative and propaganda through like digital stuff. Right, and I think this is why intelligence is maybe brought up in the poem. The idea of trying to see outside of the status quo, see the things that are like, you know, sort of attempted to be cloistered, and it is then very painful for all parties involved to witness that pain, perhaps, or for that pain to exist. The tear of the minorities wins with fury, Unaware of water and air and the illusion of continuity, warm or claimed to be warm, from a comfortable roof it steps outside. Right. So then this is the idea of the action of like consciously stepping out of like a comfortable, sequestered, I guess like privileged life. Um, Sort of the notion of, I guess, like the person who is fortunate, right, realizing the suffering in the world and like the suffering that underpins the existence that they are afforded. Um, and then maybe this is like an understanding of like solidarity, right? Perhaps to use that word. Chile has evil shit, but at least we have the no slavery since the beginning. Well, there you go. You got one win. Upside down, mistakenly, it breathes. Dangerous or unstable, but the only place to look or see. I think this is nice, right? Describing that minority, that person who sees, is described as dangerous and unstable, is described as the enemy to society once it exits, you know, the sphere of acceptable political belief, right? And I think you can sort of outline this sort of Overton window idea by who gets called, you know, a danger to society by society, right? By like, I guess, popular media and all of that. But also the idea of going out into something dangerous and unstable, like stepping into a life of less for the sake of like fighting this thing or whatever, which I think people very rarely actually do. Um, like a lot of solidarity stops at realization, unfortunately, and this is sort of your, you know, person who like reposts things without action. Sort of your person who just exists comfortably. Um, Cold or claimed to be cold, but the only place to know, or in the curse of knowing, to be a branch, right? And so like to step out into the cold is how one knows and how one understands like suffering, or in the curse of knowing, to be a branch, right? So when you know, to be a branch, to like offer a branch, maybe this is an olive branch of peace if we're thinking like biblical, but also just like a branch as something extended to someone else. I think this poem is supportive of the idea of knowing the horrors of the world, right? And then like actively doing something against them, right? And taking that step. And I think there's this question of there are many people who know, and it's very unclear about how to take that step for many people. And that's maybe like a struggle outlined here, or that's like a struggle that I see, right? Um, to some extent, slavery is still very much a thing. Yeah. Uh, when it's between countries or social situations, aren't we all slaves to billionaires? Yeah, I mean, everyone's a slave to like the ultra wealthy, but there's also literal slavery, right? Like occurring in the world. America employs slavery in like prison labor, like that's legal in places. Um, like there is like true wage slavery, right? True wage slavery of like making like, you know, $1 an hour in some like sweatshop or factory. Um, but on a relative scale, like yes, like all labor is basically slavery, right? Food industry is widely doing it too. Yeah, I don't know like the extensive sort of details. The tier of the minorities wins with fury. Upside down, mistakenly it breathes. Tear, scream, and breath. Um, Something that's interesting to me about this poem that I don't quite grasp is like the tier of the minorities wins with fury. like the winning part. This is always the struggle for me with any poem that uh points to any poem that points to like politics, that offers like victory, better have a good idea of that victory, right? And maybe it's just this idea. I guess that it's not that it wins, but if it wins with fury. Maybe that's the idea. And it is, once you are in the minority of those who know, right? And maybe even the minority of those who know and have solidarity, the answer is true fury, right? The answer is true fury and true action. Um, and to tear or to tear and to scream. Um, the breathing thing is interesting. Mistakenly it breathes, upside down, mistakenly it breathes. And breath. I don't feel like it's pointing so far back to like 2020 and George Floyd and I Can't Breathe, but it could be. How breath. I'm uncertain about breath as it pertains to this poem and as it interacts with the rest of this poem. Um, it is all very, very abstract and took a long time to work through that, though, and come to some sort of provisional meaning that I think feels relatively satisfying right now. Um, so, in writing this poem, I had no intention of engaging with any political theme, but I can easily understand how it might evoke that feeling. The true heart of the poem is birth. Yes, both biological and philosophical birth. A human being's arrival into the world, tears, approaching with fury, etc. It's all part of a biological depiction of fertilization and birth. Wanted the title to begin that way, life itself in breath, that first breath of a baby, the scream. Yeah, so like the idea of interesting. Interesting that you've gone so far into abstraction that it really leaves that intention. At least to me, it leaves it very far behind. I think like even being told, right, your intention. I think it's like for my mind, for my analytic mind, it's still tough to like draw those strings together, right? I mean, like unaware of water and air, sure, like these things make sense. But like they slip into the herd stealthily. And then like okay, to be the one who finds, to be the one who finds. And like okay, approaching that first step, right? This can evoke like childhood. Eagerness takes more to its path. And I don't know, the one who finds, to be the one who finds, like as a refrain, doesn't feel immensely evocative of that thing. And like the minorities, right? So this minority becomes like the child. I guess there's like that idea of minor. Um, I see upside down mistakenly it breathes, right? This is birth makes sense, right? It coming out upside down of the body. Okay. It steps outside from. I see. So what we're creating, right, is birth. I got it. Okay, birth as this initial loss of perfect innocence, right? And this idea of innocence or herd stuff naturally would be very evocative of this political thing, right? To be like, to just to not see that status quo. But so this status quo is like a perfect un unsullied place, right? The womb. Um, so you're unaware of like life in the illusion of continuity, this perfect warm place that will exist forever. They slip into the herd stealthily. Oh, so this is fertilization. Is that then, right? The one who finds to be the one who finds. This is like the sperm race? Question mark. That could be that, right? As the refrain of like an idea of fertilization. I don't think there's any like I don't I see. The spoon no longer gather. The sun burns not the lows but the peak. Who will surface hatred or lust? Someone must. See, I think this like kind of steps away from that reading for me. Is this not and then like these like is this not why we assume the buckets are full of water? Is this not why we assume winter is cold and cold is winter? I mean maybe this speaks to like an origin, right? Like the fundamental origin of human mind is in a place of continuity and like safety and like a status quo, right? A normalcy that then underpins all thought from that point on, right? And so to be born is the thrusting out from a place of innocence that we can never return to. Those who remain indifferent recklessly meet desire sensations. Fate and intelligence clash, mind and desires fight. The soul cog of indecision and folly keeps turning at full speed. The movements of views repeat once more. Yeah, it's a obviously a vague poem, right? I think that's cool because I can read it this way, and you can write it that way, and it creates this opportunity for many readings. Domination takes shape in the very center of screams and giggles. A bomb is dropped subtly and accepted. I see. That's interesting. um, it's cool. Like I see how all of this is like going for that stuff. Um, it's the last thing I would have read. I think. Um, Tears of the minorities approach with fury. Yeah, yeah. That's so cool. That's really interesting. Ray, you were saying something. I know that people often talk about working hours, wages, and modern capitalist system as slavery. Just remember that slavery is more than that. It's the deprivation of the individual, the singular and corporeal unity of their personhood, the social historical role of function as human beings assume and perform their interactions with others. Yeah, and I think that's why, like, when the idea of like we are all slaves to capital, like, yes, it's sort of true, but it's also important to bring up like there is real slavery, and like the plight of the middle class American is not the plight of the slave. Um, but yeah, although all sort of originate from the same like ethos and ethic, so there's that. And I think that's where like the like all are unified under like those conditions, but whatever. Okay, Kutara, I mean, you've heard my honest and unfiltered view of this poem, and and you've informed me of your intention. Do you have any questions about this work? Do you have any thoughts or questions about this work, or questions about writing or poetry in general, are all welcome. Or if anyone else has comments about this work. Vague poems are really nice, as you say, Ray. I think I think for me, vagueness is most effective when it's tethered, and it feels like there is a core of like a work that can be agreed upon in a way, and then the vagueness is like the association surrounding it. I don't know if that makes sense. Um, but that's sort of my thought on vagueness. But yeah, any questions, Kutara? No questions. It was a pleasure to hear your thoughts and analysis. Well, you are very welcome, and it was my pleasure to read it. Here is And Breath. Tears of the minorities approach with fury. Unaware of water and air and the illusion of continuity, they slip into the herd stealthily. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. The spoons can no longer gather. The sun burns not the lows but the peak. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. Who will surface? Hatred or lust? Someone must. Is this not why we assume the buckets are full of water? Who will be a snow-white crow on that approaching first step? Someone must. Is this not why we assume the winter is cold and cold is winter? Eagerness takes more to its path. The harmful ones approach with fury. Unaware of heart and mind, in the deception of nature, they slip into the herd mistakenly. To be the one who finds, to be the one who finds. Those who remain indifferent recklessly meet the desires of sensations. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. Fate and intelligence clash, mind and desires fight. The sole cog of indecision and folly keeps turning at full speed. The movements of views repeat once more. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. Tear, scream, breath. Domination takes shape. Into the very center of screams and giggles, a bomb is dropped, subtly and accepted. The one who finds, to be the one who finds. The tear of the minorities wins with fury, unaware of water and air. In the illusion of continuity, warm or claimed to be warm, from that comfortable roof it steps outside. Upside down, mistakenly, it breathes. Dangerous or unstable, but the only place to look or see. Cold or claimed to be cold, but the only place to know, or in the curse of knowing, to be a branch. The tear of the minorities wins with fury. Upside down, mistakenly it breathes. Tear, scream. And Breath by Kutara222. Thank you so very much for submitting your work. It is my pleasure, and I I read these things and get the chance to look at them and do so with the deepest of gratitude. Um, Stream does not exist without y'all sending me poetry. Me as a poet does not exist without reading the works of so many amazing writers like all of you. And I don't know. I think there are very few other people who get to see as many contemporary poems from unexpected places and read them as deeply as I do. I guess like people at literary magazines, but they get so many submissions they have to like read them in 5 minutes. It'd probably be very stifling. I get to like ponder y'all's works and y'all send them to me with that intention, and I think that's really cool. And yeah, I really, it means very much to be able to read all of this work. And thank you to everyone who submitted today. We won't be reading anymore. 3 poems in 3 hours has done a number on my voice, so it's the end of the part where I talk enthusiastically about poems, I suppose. Damn. Man, it would be pretty damn hard, I would say, for me to go on past the 3 hour and 20 minute mark and start another poem now. Um, I think. Uh, I even had the fancy message. I don't think I saw your fancy message, honestly. Um, I mean, if possible, oh, you were typing it up. If possible, that the Lord Imogen will feel the strength and inclination to read another gracious text of this humble follower. Ah, so beautiful, so full of life. um, it is unfortunate, and I only wish, right, that I had the mental and physical strength to just sit here and do this in like if I could do this like every day for like 5 hours straight, I would, you know. Um but the body and mind have limits. It's a sad thing. It's a sad reality that we are flawed and we are human, and we were birthed from a place of comfort and must at some point return to comfort, lest we fall apart, lest we cry. Must imagine me as a Shakespearean actor every time I type these. Yeah. Is it possible that Lord Imogen will feel the strength and inclination to read another gracious text from this humble follower? Could be. Could be. You should write it in verse. um, but no, it was a lovely stream, and I really appreciated all 3 of the poems we read. They were all really lovely and unique and powerful in their own capacity. A full-on sonnet. If you write the sonnet once, then you'll just be able to like every time you want me to read your stuff, to just send the sonnet, right? And then it will be so easy. I guess maybe it won't have the same what do we say, the same meaning to it. It won't be original every time. So maybe you should write a sonnet every time. Ever think about that? That'd be good. That'd be good. Um yeah, it's not that hard. Just a little 5 minute sonnet. You get real good. uh all right. Yeah, that's enough for me. I am tired. My like stomach hurts for a weird reason. I don't know. It's like right here. Um, kind of like, I don't know. Doesn't feel very pleasant right here, I guess. Which is one thing that's motivating me to stop my stream right now. So I will bid ye all farewell. You ate something? I did eat something. Um, I don't know if it's like a food poisoning situation. Maybe it's all of the evil American food that the FDA is full of freaking parasites and I don't know, like brain-eating prions and mind-melting amoebas and stuff. Who knows? I ate spinach already today, but I highly doubt it. You know, um, it's probably just my stomach acting weird. I don't know. I guess it does that sometimes. I should just lay down. Maybe I've been like sitting like this too much, like at my desk, like at my computer, like doing poetry and analyzing things, and maybe I just need to like go outside and like walk around, and that will ease some of my pains. Who knows? I wouldn't be the one to know. Uh, anyway, yeah, I'm just gonna end stream and let everyone scatter into the rest of the writing and reading category. Um, so poetry poisoning, maybe, maybe. So thank you all for watching. Truly, uh, it's especially cool when you all have contributions and thoughts on the poems and when you send me stuff and there's just people around to share poetry with and to share knowledge and ideas and all of that. Um, and I hope that each and every one of you goes and keeps making art that you love and that you keep finding beauty because there is so much of it in this little world and this little life that you are for a brief moment afforded. And I'll see y'all next time.